So this is how I put some tissue to stop the lead from coming out. Now when I'm doing this, I will be wearing a glove to make sure that if the lead does come out, I don't get burned. But touch wood, I haven't had a problem so far. Now one of the things we're going to do when we're actually pouring the lead is, based on what we know inside here, this is a hole in here where this clips around the stainless steel wire that goes from here to here, all the way to the tail. And you have a void here that's connected to a void here. So what we're going to do is, as we're pouring it, we'll take it away, we'll fill it about halfway up, and then we'll kind of do this to it. And that'll slosh that liquid lead back and forth to make sure that that lead goes into this place, into this void here. Now, as we fill it, the angle that we'll be filling at is about like this. And we know that there's a small amount of wood here, and we're going to fill it as much as we can. And then one of the things we have to be careful about is having too much lead in here, because if you have too much lead, then it's very difficult to cover over. So you might see me, depending on how it works, giving it a bit of a flick, and you might see some lead popping out, so that there's a tiny little void here, so it makes it so much easier to fill. I'm going to show you what filler I use here. It's a LePage's filler. Very, very good. Watertight, hard, yet when it's first dry, it's relatively easy to sand, but it is in fact waterproof. Okay, so now I've straightened out this one, put in the paper, so this one's ready for the pour. This one here is not. So let me put a little bit of paper in there. Now sometimes the lead will hang on to a little bit of the paper, which is okay. Very rare does the lead come out the top here, very rare. But when you're talking about molten metal, I don't want to take a chance. It doesn't have to be particularly pretty. Just get it in there, and literally it has to last 15 seconds. Okay, so that's done. So now what we're going to do is we're going to fill in the nose here a little bit. Alright, so that's ready. The last thing we'll do, I'll take a piece of tape and put it across these eye holes here, because the lead will come out. You know, it looks like a small hole, but the lead will definitely come out. So what you do is you simply put the tape over, and then you work it down around the hole. Now, if the lead comes out too far, you're going to have to get rid of it, because that's where the eye fits. So if you've got lead popping out there and it's holding the eye up from sitting properly, you're going to have to dig it out. So that's a good reason, is to just kind of do this. Now, last quick check. That top loop looks pretty good. That bottom loop lines up pretty good. And now this lure is ready for the lead. So I'll heat up the pot. Of course, one of the most important things when you're dealing with lead is the vapors. You want to open the doors, do it outside if you can, and it will take, I like to pour the lead just after it's melted. I don't want scorching hot lead to get in there, because what happens is it burns the wood inside. Now, you can tell if your sidewalls are too thin, and if you use lead that's too hot, you'll actually burn the wood. And of course, anytime you burn the wood, you can fix it as far as people won't see it, but it's probably a weak spot. So this lure has one of the biggest weak spots is right here. Of course, it's the smallest, it's the tail, and that's no different to commercial hooks or any other hook. But because we're going to be dribbling epoxy down here, it's going to go down a little ways. That doesn't mean that the Wahoo can't rip that end off, but I know several people who have had commercial lures crack here from the pressure of the fighting Wahoo. So Wahoo's a crazy fish, and it's a absolutely ball to catch these things, but they can be rather destructive on equipment. Okay, so I'm going to start heating up the lead and open the doors, and we'll set up a little video to show you how to handle the pour. Okay, so the lead pot has been heated up, and what I normally do is I'll skim any stuff off the top of the lead, and I'll also test where the lead comes out, because sometimes that gets, I think you can probably see that lead's coming out pretty good. So now, put on my safety equipment. I got my gloves on. So now I'm going to fill it up, hopefully about half full, slosh it back, and then fill it up all the way. Okay, here we go. This is a great little pot for pouring lead. Very precise. I saw it on the internet once and I just had to have it, and it has been an absolute dream ever since I've got it. Now I'm going to do this. Now, even though this continues to drip, now sloshed as much as I need to slosh. Again, I'm going to now complete the fill, and it's going to come right up to the top. Might even sputter a little bit at the top, because if there's little bits of glue inside, it will melt it and it'll bubble like water. Now, see it come out? So I've splashed it a little bit. I can take a little bit more lead in there. Just a little bit though. And it will harden very, very quickly. And that's it. The pour is done. You may recall this chart that I had put up, this calculation. So the original lure, I said, was 300 grams. But I wanted mine a little heavier, so I wanted to target weight of 400 grams. Now, this delta, this meant 200 grams per side. But we know this delta, which was is a measurement error, I thought would be higher. So you'd have to take your weight of a half and subtract 30 grams. So my target weight was 170 grams. That's when I had the lead shot in it. Now, according to my records here, I actually got 190 grams per side. That's what I weighed. That was my guess. So now I get to show you what the lure actually turned out. Turn on the weigh scale. There we go. 407 grams. Again, a reminder, my target weight was 400 grams, 407. Couldn't be better. I'm going to brag a little bit, but you know what? You would never do this well on your first lure because you don't know what that delta is. I've made 9 of these lures, and I had a pretty good idea what the delta was. So our next task is to work on these loops. So this is what it should look like. The loops should just simply rise out of the epoxy, and this loop hasn't been cleaned off yet, that's why it's still black, but you want to put 5-minute epoxy in this hole right there. Now before you do that, you line up that loop down the center line, make sure it's straight up and down this way and left to right as well. So let's do that right now. I'll show you the other loops as well. And the nose is also a place you're going to have to add epoxy. So I'm going to do this top loop, and then I'll do the nose, and the other two loops are identical to the top. So I don't want to bore you. So I'm going to take my little scratch sheet here, and I'm going to stick some of my wonderful Gorilla Glue on it that I like so much. Now you got to watch out with this stuff. These little syringes, they stick from time to time. You'll get more of one out than the other, and I fixed that by always making a little bit more. It's a little bit more expensive, but that way I've never had a problem. Now when you're mixing the epoxy, you always go from the outside in. If you are doing several hooks, you can actually make a modest amount, maybe a middle amount, and then what happens is when you put the epoxy in, it will dribble down around that wraparound, and then you'll have to put in more. So you want it in one pour. You don't want to come back later and say, oh gee, I have to fill it up some more. I have had to do that. I don't like doing that. I would prefer a single pour. So we've got roughly 2 minutes to work on this, and I use this little stainless steel wire. It's a 1/16. I use this for the through wire on some of my smaller hooks. The leftover pieces also are very, very good for doing this. I'll put that in there. And of course the first thing it's going to do is want to dribble down. So this is the time when the 5-minute epoxy is the least viscous, because it's going to start to thicken here right away. So you want to get this stuff down there, and you can even kind of poke it down. That helps quite a bit actually. You go back from side to side. Try not to get too much on the wood, but it's not a bad idea to actually contact the epoxy all around the hole, because that makes sure it'll be a water seal, a really good water seal. Now you need to do around the back as well, and tomorrow what I'll do is I'll cut this out with a knife, but even this little bit I'm putting in here along the back side will dribble in, and same goes for the front. The 5-minute epoxy is kind of hard to see sometimes because it's clear. It's actually just a little bit off clear, but in these small amounts it looks pretty darn clear. So every once in a while you got to kind of look at it from an angle and say, well, gee, where's my true level? Now I can't turn this sideways right now because I've got the glue in it, but it's looking pretty darn good. But I know that in the next minute or two that could drop a fair bit. I'm also going to go down the sides here and make sure I got rid of any bubbles. Sometimes a big old bubble will come up when you least expect it. So that actually felt like there was a bit of a void in there. So I'm going to put a little bit more than I need. This particular one is hard to cut, just because it's got the big flat face in front of it. And the belly hook is actually very simple to cut because the belly lends itself to working with a razor knife around it. So that looks pretty darn good. And I have a very simple, these lures are rather difficult to lay in one position because, you know, there's nothing flat on them. So I have an old Kleenex box, and you set that just so, and it sits there perfectly. Okay, so I'm going to end the video in about 10-15 minutes. I'll come back and do the nose.